Governor John Hickenlooper sent a letter to state lawmakers on Thursday urging major changes to how Colorado collects revenue and issues taxpayer refunds. Legislators from both sides of the aisle met the letter with skepticism, saying there isn't enough time left in the session to tackle something so complicated. David, this one came out of left field, at least for me. It sounds like there might be some really decent ideas in here, but they're pretty far-fetched into that. I hadn't seen anything like this proposed in addressing revenue and how we collect taxes as a state. What did you think of the initial details we received so far? Because it's brand new. It just came out yesterday.
Well, one of the ways Governor Hickenlooper is very different from all of his predecessors that I can remember, going back to Dick Lamb, is how disengaged he is from the legislative process. You're not supposed to be down there lobbying yourself as the governor, but if there's something important, you're keeping an eye on it. And if you have something to say, you say it at a time when it matters. He's like a guy, the budget, the long bill, the biggest thing the legislature passes. Months of work by the Joint Budget Committee. It's been to both houses, lots of pro and con debate, and he's the equivalent of a guy who, after your house is 99% built and they're putting on the curtain rods, he comes in and says, well, maybe we should tear down the entire second story and put a swimming pool up there. It might or might not be a good idea, but it's really late in the process to come in with this, and I'm just baffled why it took so long. If he wants to talk about it on a forward-looking way, not for this year's budget, but for the future, then he's on time for this. In practice, if there are pressures on the budget, it's his fault more than anybody else's, because he's the one who unilaterally did this Medicaid expansion, and everything else in our state budget that is getting squeezed out, whether it's higher education, which actually gets a lot of per capita support, but everything, all budget pressures are the result of, in the long term, the incredible growth in Medicaid. And besides that, the state gives $1 billion in corporate welfare every year, and we ought to cut that out first before taking away people's tax refunds from them.
Eric, I guess David hit one of my biggest points of confusion, which isn't necessarily the details, because we don't have all the details for the proposal, but it was the timing. With only a couple weeks left in the session, nothing can get done this year. If it should be this big presentation that should get a lot of public support, wait till the summer. The timing right now just seemed odd, but what do you think?
I think you can certainly second guess the timing, and many people will, and David did. I regard it as an act of frustration on Governor Hickenlooper's part. I believe that he has been involved in plenty of private conversations with leadership and thinking that he was moving the ball forward. Maybe he was deluding himself, but thinking he was moving the ball forward, particularly with Senate President Cadman and others. And then all of a sudden he looks at the clock and the session is winding down and it is all stuck. And I think he went to this as somewhat of a last-ditch maneuver to try to break things loose. It might be too much last ditch. It has interesting pieces in it. Whatever you make of the Medicaid expansion, and I share some of those hesitations because it is just the elephant that is consuming everything in the state budget right now. At least the idea of turning the hospital provider fee, which was passed back in the Ritter era, and turning that into basically getting it off the books in terms of TABOR impact and turn it into more of an enterprise operation. That does, and I think that would enjoy some bipartisan support, more Democrats than Republicans, but some bipartisan support. And that would at least take everything that's going to Medicaid and somewhat wall it off from consuming everything else in the state budget, whether it's K-12, whether it's corrections, whether it's roads and transportation or whatever. So I think there's some interesting pieces in this. The question is the timing and whether there is an ability in the last 3 weeks or whatever's left of the session to really get anything done or cobble together that coalition.
Natasha, there seems to be a lot of lawmakers, and frankly from both sides of the aisle, that would like to see something done, I guess, as Governor Hickenlooper describes the fiscal thicket. Do you think, despite the timing, this could lead to some progress with lawmakers, what the governor's proposing?
I think that need and that desire to have that conversation was happening long before Hickenlooper sent this letter. The timing is a concern, but even outside of the Capitol, I just don't think people want to think about taxes right now. We just filed them. Like, let's have a little bit of break. And when you start talking about taking away a refund, no one wants to have that conversation right now. The problem, the thing that I'm concerned with his letter is that I don't think it addresses the issue. It's a Band-Aid, it's a diversion, it's a squirrel look over there type of approach to what really needs to be discussed, which is TABOR, which is where the frustration on both sides with both parties lies. And that conversation, I don't think we can avoid it. I think it's coming. I wouldn't be surprised if we see renewed conversation about it this summer and into next year, and that the voters might have to get involved at some point. It's going to happen.
Lynn, what was your reaction on the Hill when this letter came down?
I think the timing thing was the same thing, the tax thing. I saw a lawmaker's wife there, and I go, what is she doing? Is she working here? And he goes, oh, no, she had to come get me to sign the tax return, too, because we owe, you know. I'm going to disagree with a lot of what David said here. John Hickenlooper, I think, has been more engaged this session than any year since he has been governor. He has never been the kind that say, let's have a big press conference to say what I'm working on. He's very much, let's bring people in, let's work behind the scenes, let's do this, let's do that. When you talk about Medicaid and that sort of thing, I can remember, you know, I'm so old that I can, you know, his budget director used to work for Bill Owens. And I can remember back in my early days of covering the ledge when they said Medicaid's gobbling everything up. This isn't something that was created by Bill Ritter. It may have been made worse with the provider, the hospital provider fee. The other thing is, I have a question. When you talk about corporate welfare, are you talking about tax credits?
No. Oh, you mean like
For,
target?
what are you referring to?
Yeah, well, for example, like if you produce a movie in the state, you not only pay no taxes, and then the state government gives you money. You know, you're some billionaire Hollywood producer, and you get welfare for filming a movie in Colorado.
I'd rather have welfare for movies than some of the other corporate things. I will tell you that business does come into hearings and say things because of the Gallagher Amendment. And once again, we go back to our strange, screwed up tax system in this state. Because of the Gallagher Amendment, they pay so much more money than homeowners do on their property, and they feel some of these breaks are needed.